I spent a nightmare alone in my haunted house and uncovered its terrifying secrets. I never should have opened that door. It was a simple, rusty door in my new house, but something screamed at me not to. I could feel the dread creeping up my spine. Every day felt heavier since I moved in. Shadows warred against the dim lights, and the air always smelled stale, like something ancient long forgotten. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. My morning routine felt normal, but something was off. The coffee didn't taste right. I'd been awake since dawn, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My heart raced as I walked through the empty hallways, the cold air wrapping around me like a shroud. Every little sound, a creak from the floorboards, the whisper of the wind sent chills racing through my body. Something was alive here. I tried to ignore the problems piling up. I focused on unpacking boxes. But the deeper I dug into my new home, the more it taunted me. I started hearing things, muffled voices, laughter echoing through the walls, a child's giggle that felt all too close. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my door. My breath hitched. Cold sweat trickled down my back. And then, I got swept up in it. The door pulled at me like a siren. I felt drawn to it. The wood knotted and twisted, a dark stain spreading like a blot on my memories. As my hand reached for the handle, I could almost hear whispers, hard to make out but insistent. Open it, they seemed to chant. My fingers trembled. I hesitated. The darkness beyond felt alive, breathing. Through the dim light in the hall, I could see shadows darting, pooling around my feet. My mind raced. Was it my imagination? This was just an old house, right? But there was a weight to it, like it was history trying to pull me in. I took a breath, heart pounding, and opened the door just a crack. A chill burst forth, wrapping around me. It felt like 1,000 icy fingers brushing my skin. I pressed my ear to the wood-soft whispers beckoning, urging me to step inside the black abyss. My gut twisted. Anxiety clawed at me. Then the lights flickered, plunging me into near darkness. I gasped, pulling back. The door slammed wider, almost on its own, emitting a cacophony of whispers that flooded my ears. I stumbled back, my vision swirling. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadow. My blood ran cold as I realized I wasn't alone. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure stood there, an indistinct silhouette, every detail devoured by the darkness that surrounded it. I stumbled backward, cold dread coiling around my heart. The whispers morphed, turning into guttural murmurs that wrapped around my consciousness like a vice. Join us, stay forever. Fleeing instinctively, my back hit the wall, causing pain to shoot through me. My breath was shallow, quickening, as I fought the urge to scream. It felt as if the very floor beneath me pulsed with a life of its own, thrumming against the rhythm of my panicked heart. The shadows slithered closer, their edges sharp and menacing, threatening to slice through the thin veil of light. Who are you? My voice trembled, quavering as it pierced the whispers with a clarity that felt far too fragile in this oppressive air. The figure shifted, its form unfurling like smoke in a breeze. The shadows curled away from the light spilling in from the hallway, and for a brief moment, I saw something hideous, a face twisted in anguish, hollow eyes that were not eyes at all, but dark voids sucking the warmth from the air. A grin split the darkness, revealing rows of teeth too many and too sharp. Release yourself, sweetheart. Let go of your fear. My heart raced, pounding against my ribcage so fiercely I feared it might burst. The whispers rose in a crescendo, lulling and taunting, an otherworldly song that promised peace and ecstasy under the relentless caress of despair. I was drawn to it against my will, the pull of the abyss like gravity, an overwhelming embrace that threatened to consume my very essence. No. I screamed, the word tearing from my throat, raw and desperate. In that instant, it hesitated, the grip of its darkness loosening slightly. The figure seemed to shimmer, almost flickering like a candle about to be extinguished. But the shadows fought back. They surged, a tidal wave of despair crashing over me, tendrils wrapping around my ankles, pulling me inexorably closer. A howl pierced the silence, echoing through the house like the wailing of a storm. Startled, I turned my gaze away from the figure, now reduced to a grinning mask of horror, to the hallway behind me. The walls echoed the cries of lost souls, their sorrow a tangible weight. Leave! Leave now! I shouted, my voice cracking, echoing back as if the house itself mocked my plea. The door shuddered violently, shaking against the frame as if something ancient stirred within. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet felt anchored in place. I was trapped here, suspended in the heartbeat of the supernatural. The air reeked of decay and madness, a suffocating combination that burned my lungs. In one desperate lunge, I tore myself away and bolted from the door, sprinting toward the far end of the hallway. But as I turned the corner, the walls began to shift. They pulsated and moved like viscous liquid, distorting the very geometry of the house. I saw doorways collapse into themselves and hallways elongate into infinite voids. Panic clawed at my throat as I realized the house was a living unbreathable terror, consuming and reshaping its very structure to ensnare me. Help! I cried, my voice drowning in the shadows. Just below that cry lay desperate dread, realization creeping in like cold fog. I was the interloper in this twisted reality. Desperation drove me on, but the house fought back, each step felt like an uphill battle. And then, I heard it in a child's laughter echoing through the warped hallways. It was familiar, and yet, infused with a sinister edge, beckoning me to follow. I hesitated as the weight of dread settled like a stone in my gut. It was at that moment, a flicker of movement caught my eye. The figure shot into view, blocking my escape, but now it had shifted, transformed. A little girl stood before me, her face smeared with darkness, eyes reflecting something unspeakable. In a voice that chilled me to the bone, she whispered, "You shouldn't have opened that door. Now you belong to us." And just as I processed her words, the ground shook, and the house roared with a fury that would drown out everything. The shadows converged, silencing my screams as they swept over me, merging my fate with the cursed sanctum of the home. The last thing I saw was the girl's toothy grin, wide and unyielding, before the darkness enveloped me entirely. My senses faded, one by one, as the darkness embraced me. It seeped into my skin, devouring every trace of light, every whisper of hope. A disembodied feeling took hold, as if I were both inside my body and outside it, drifting through a liminal space where the shades of life and death blurred. My heart receded, a singular, steady beat lost against the cacophony of a million other racing hearts beneath the chill of the house's embrace. Suddenly, I was standing again, but not in the hallway. It was an unfamiliar room, dimly lit by the flicker of a lantern swaying in the grip of an unseen breeze. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something metallic I couldn't quite place. I looked around, my body trembling as I sought a familiar face among the shadows. The little girl, the figure, they were gone. Hello. My voice wavered, the word feeling foreign on my tongue. The echo was swallowed by the oppressive silence around me, creating a cocoon of isolation. Lingering wisps of shadow clung to the edges of the room, stretching and swirling like tendrils yearning for warmth. On a table before me, a tattered journal lay open, filled with frayed pages that trembled, as if alive. Drawn to it, I approached cautiously, every step echoing like a countdown. The words scrawled across the pages were barely legible, pages stained with remnants of something dark and wet. It was a family's record, chronicling their joys and sorrows, a chronicle that spiraled into madness, and when the last breath was drawn, we called upon the shadows for solace. It was a ritual, executed in growing torment. My stomach twisted as I stumbled back, realization hitting me like a physical blow. They had surrendered their souls, expecting deliverance from their despair, but instead delivered themselves to the very darkness I encountered. "Leave this place," a voice hissed from the corner of the room. I turned sharply, my heart plummeting. Another figure, this one indistinct and wavering like a mirage, emerged from the shadows. The remnants of a face flickered into view, hollow cheeks and eyes that mirrored the abyss. "You mustn't linger here. They will come for you," the figure murmured, its voice barely more than a breath. Fear seized me, a paralyzing grip that anchored my feet to the floor. Who will come?" I whispered, the urgency pressing down on my chest. "The ones trapped, like you." "Like us," it replied, as the darkness behind it began to wriggle and pulse. "You have awakened them, and they demand their due." That I felt cold fingers at my back, ghostly touches that sent shockwaves of fear chasing down my spine. The walls of the room shuddered, echoing with the sounds of desperate whispers clawing for release. Shadows advanced, coiling around my legs. I turned my head, searching for some escape, but the room twisted, folding into itself until it felt like a tether of despair stitched me to the very fabric of this nightmare. "Help!" I screamed, but even my screams fell victim to the smothering silence. The shadows thickened, a dark tide that rushed around me, and the lurking dread became palpable, forming a heavy cloak that threatened to suffocate. With one last fleeting breath of defiance, I lunged towards the only door I could find. The room expanded and contracted, making every step feel like running through water. As I grasped the doorknob, it turned to ice beneath my fingertips, and the shadows shrieked, 100 voices rising in a diabolical chorus. "Stay with us," they cried, "you won't escape." The door burst open before I could even scream, revealing a corridor that stretched into infinity, fraught with glimmering promises of despair. The very walls seemed to breathe the perpetual rhythm of insufficiency and terror, and from the depths of that darkness emerged the little girl again, a sinister smile etched across her smudged face. "I know where you want to go. Come along," she beckoned, her hand reaching out, fingers twisting with corded black tendrils. As her grin widened, then, without warning, the walls pulsed violently, closing in around me. The girl's laughter morphed into a sound I could scarcely comprehend, a distant echo of anguish threading through companionship and torment. My heart raced, knowing the truth. The house had claimed me, and its secrets surged to the surface, ready to pull me under. As I felt myself being drawn deeper into the void, I glimpsed a flicker of something beyond a light, almost a memory, radiated, making me long for life outside this cursed abode. But chasing after it carried the weight of nightmares, and before I could reach for the light, 2 cold hands clasped around my throat, squeezing tightly in a vice grip. "Stay," 1,000 voices whispered, swelling into a deafening roar. In that instant, the ground cracked, splitting the air and throwing me against the doorway. I teetered on the edge, my vision blurring as the dark shadows pulled and tugged, threatening to rip me apart. And then, just as I steadied myself, I felt my feet slip from beneath me. I fell, plummeting into inky darkness, the screams echoing around me, consuming all hope. "Welcome home," they hissed, as I tumbled into a nightmare of unspeakable horrors, the house around me transforming into something horrific, and Olivia a living tomb that hungered for the story I was bound to tell. The weight of darkness enveloped me in a crushing embrace as I fell deeper, spiraling into a void devoid of light and reason. The screams faded into a dissonant hum, pulsing like a heartbeat around me, drowning out my gasps for air. I closed my eyes, praying the abyss wouldn't swallow me whole. When I opened them again, I wasn't falling anymore. I lay sprawled on the cold floor of another room, the air thick and viscous, clinging to my skin, repelling me like oil against water. Above me, the ceiling was a terrible tapestry of shifting shadows that writhed and twisted, as if they were alive, eager to devour whatever hope remained within me. I pushed myself upright, trembling as I took stock of my surroundings. The room was grotesque. Walls bled a lurid green, and remnants of what seemed to be old photographs adorned the space, faces trapped in expressions of torment. They seemed to leer at me, their mouths open in horrific, silent cries, their eyes hollow and pleading. A closet in the corner swung ajar, shadow spilling out like smoke, and I could have sworn I heard the whisper of a child, beckoning me come play. I shivered against a cold draft that slithered through the cracks, bouncing off the floorboards that groaned under my weight, telling the stories of anguish past. A low keening began to fill the room, a wave of sorrow that escorted tremors down my spine. I staggered towards the door, yearning for escape, but before I could reach it, a figure emerged from the closet, stepping into the half-light that it was a woman, but not fully formed. Her features flickered like a faulty projection, a face I could almost recognize swimming through layers of distortion and shadow. Her mouth opened, and her words sliced through the air, an agonizing wail wrapped in pleading. "Find me. You must find me before they take what's left. What do you mean?" I managed to stammer, my heart pounding in time with the thrumming shadows that seemed eager to pull her back into their depths, but her image began to dissolve, the very particles of her form unraveling into tendrils of darkness. "They want to trap you like they trapped me," she gasped, the voice echoing, morphing into a shrill shriek that reverberated off the walls. "You need to break the cycle." With that, she vanished, leaving me alone with the sound of fading panic reverberating through the room. The shadows pulsed with menace, coiling tighter as I tried to catch my breath, grasping at the remnants of her words that I had no clue what cycle she referred to, but before I could contemplate further, the once quiet whispers escalated into a cacophony, spiraling into frenetic chants that rattled my very soul. Each word bore the weight of dread, a name, or perhaps a command: "Find the heart. Find the heart." What heart? The darkness beckoned, the shadows now lurching towards me with eyes I could not see but felt hot on my skin. Adrenaline surged, compelling me toward the door. The doorknob, warm to the touch, turned easily, and I quickly slipped into the corridor, my pulse racing like a desperate flame. The hallway stretched onward, but the atmosphere grew heavier with each step, the dim light revealing something unnatural at the edges of my vision, figures darting back into the shadows as if I were an unwelcome intruder in their hell. I felt them watching, waiting for my next move. Then I heard Ida's soft cooing that filled the air, the sort of sound that wrapped around you, sweet and sickly. It drew me toward a room at the far end, its door slightly ajar, an invitation laced with malevolence. I crept closer, my breath shallow, heart a drum in my chest. Inside, a soft light glowed, illuminating a small cradle in the center, its gentle swaying undeniably inviting. But something felt wrong. I peered closer, and that's when I saw Ida, heart, pulsing, grotesque, and beating rhythmically within the cradle, tethered by thin, blackened strings that melded into the very fabric of the room. Frozen, I could only look on in horror. It radiated a warmth, a call that seemed to slice through the darkness as it pulsed. "Take it." The shadows around it beckoned, their whispers turning into pleading, "Free us." Before I could react, I felt a tug, a cold, merciless grip on my arm pulling me away. I spun around to find the little girl again, her face now twisted in anguish, her eyes devoid of innocence. "Don't touch it!" she screamed. "They want you to give in." But my gaze was locked onto that terrible heart, the very essence of life, distinctively tethered to the dark, weaving a seduction I could hardly resist. The cries of the shadows now felt like a lullaby, entrancing me, promising liberation from the chains of this nightmare. In that moment of uncertainty, a loud cracking sound erupted from the walls, fissures spiderwebbing across the ceiling, dark tendrils clawing through the cracks and reaching for me. The room felt like it was folding in on itself, and just as I spun back to the cradle, the little girl lunged forward. "The house isn't just claiming them, it wants you," she screamed, her voice tearing through the air. The shadows advanced, writhing and constricting around her. As I watched in horror, her figure melted away, devoured by darkness. And just as I was about to reach for the heart, a thunderous crash echoed through the house, sending vibrations through my very being. I turned, and within the chaos, I caught a glimpse of a figure tall, cloaked in shadow, looming at the doorway, beckoning me closer. "Join us," it beckoned, a voice smooth yet menacing. Before I could run, the creature stepped forward, a smirk cutting through the darkness. "Your fate is sealed." As blackness surged around me, drowning out all thought and sensation, I realized in that moment, the past, present, and future were all an illusion, a cruel game orchestrated by this house. Reality crumbled, leaving me utterly helpless in the grip of horror. As I was drawn toward the figure, the pulsating heart calling me with a promise of revelation and demise, and just before the shadows swallowed me whole, I heard the voice of the woman return, echoing through the void one last time. "Remember, every choice comes with a price." It was at that moment I knew this was just the beginning, and whatever I discovered, The nightmare was far from over. The shadows pulled me into a realm of chilling silence, each heartbeat articulate with terror. For a fraction of a second, I teetered on the brink of consciousness, suspended between worlds, between sanity and despair. The figure, that malevolent presence looming in the doorway, warmed with a simmering rage, beckoned me with cracked fingers as if daring me to leap into darkness. I hesitated, my body poised like a marionette suspended by invisible strings, every instinct howling for escape, but as if the house conspired against my will, the walls vibrated with the promise of unholy secrets, each crack and whisper inching me closer to the precipice of madness. "Join us," the flaming eyes of the figure implored, bending reality into a grotesque theater of horrors. My mind raced, wrestling against the siren call of the heart's rhythm that echoed in my skull, a cacophony drowning all reason. "Run!" A distant voice screamed. It was sharp and jarring, resonating deep within me. The voice of the woman? The little girl? I couldn't be sure. With newfound conviction, I leaped backward, breaking the hold the shadows had on my limbs. The figure recoiled, the smirk faltering into a snarl, and suddenly, the atmosphere thickened with their seething rage. The walls began to murmur, a language of distress wrapping around me like barbed wire. With every thrum of the pulsing heart, the shadows twisted, warping wildly as if sensing my defiance that I sprinted away, the oppressive weight of the dark pursuing me like a predator. I vaulted across the threshold into the corridor, my hands brushing against the damp walls, seeking any tactile confirmation of reality. Rounding a corner, I was greeted by more portraits. Each was distorted, transformed into frozen gasps of agony. The faces pressed against invisible glass, eyes pleading, as if warning me, yet I remained too frazzled to comprehend. Then I tripped, landing hard onto the floor, the wood splintering beneath me. I gasped for breath, and when I turned, I saw a figure sprawled face down at the foot of the stairs, cloaked in darkness but unmistakably breathing. It was the woman from before, her shape flickering in and out of solidity, as though caught between worlds and time. "Help me," she whispered, her voice mingling with the house's hum, a plea intertwined with despair. "You must break the ties." The urgency clawed at my heart as I stumbled toward her, hesitant yet compelled. "What ties? What do I do?" Her eyes flickered open, glistening with a sadness deeper than the abyss itself. "The heart, its influence keeps us tethered," she gasped as though every word demanded more energy than she could muster. "You must sever it." For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed a world beyond her a fractured glimpse of forgotten lives and broken promises. But before I could respond, the shadows swelled, surrounding her with ravenous hunger. Join us," they moaned, their voice like a sigh snatched from the depths of hell, echoing through the corridor with insatiable yearning. "Step back." I shouted, my heart thundering against my ribs as I positioned myself between her and the encroaching darkness. "I won't let them take you." With a swift movement, she gripped my forearm, her fingers icy, yet somehow electric. "You don't understand," she rasped, "I'm not what you think. I was once free, but the heart, it's my only chance to reclaim what's lost." That heartbeat surged again, a malignant force thrumming at the edges of my mind, coaxing me towards the cradle with its hypnotic chant. "Find it, feel the warmth, set us free, don't." She hissed, panic suffusing her face. "You think it's a choice? It will claim you. It's a cycle, each soul a vessel, feeding, perpetuating this nightmare." But even as she spoke, I felt dizzy with longing. The heart pulsed with an inexplicable allure, an invitation to douse the agony of the past in its warm glow. The house began to hum, vibrating through me, weaving the threads of despair tightly around my very essence. The shadows danced, dark tendrils reaching for me, hungry, insatiable. My vision blurred with longing, taunting layers of reality fracturing until I could barely distinguish what was true. "Please," I cried out, pleading with her, "show me how to break it." Before she could answer, the shadows surged forward like a tidal wave, devouring her form until she vanished into swirling void. An anguished scream tore through the house, echoed by the very walls, as if mourning her demise while celebrating my imminent doom. From the depths of that tumult, she returned, an ethereal silhouette amidst the shadows, her eyes dark and unrecognizable. "You've awakened them," she whispered, voice laden with the weight of 1,000 broken lives. Now the choice is yours, but remember, and just like that, the darkness erupted around me, engulfing all light. The room spun as if caught in a cyclone of terror, pressing me closer to the unyielding heart pulsing in its cradle, beckoning with its seductive call that I want to scream. I want to fight, I managed to think. But the shadows tightened their grip, and with a final, bone-chilling whisper, they dropped the truth. The soul of the house, its heart, its very existence hung on my next move, and then, without warning, a chilling laughter erupted from the shadows, echoing through the halls like bells ringing mournfully for the dead. An instant later, the floorboards creaked, and a low growl emanated from the depths of the house, shaking my very core. Time's up, a voice hissed from the void, make your choice before it makes it for you. Every fiber of my being screamed against the walls of impending doom as the darkness surged forward, threatening to swallow me beyond redemption. And as I stood teetering on the edge of a choice I was never prepared to make, I felt the fragile fabric of sanity snap, unraveling into nothingness as the tendrils of despair embraced me. In that fleeting heartbeat of decision, the shadows whispered promises of power and damnation, leaving me to ponder my fate as darkness consumed my very soul. The shadows twisted in an unholy dance, and every instinct screamed that I was mere moments from succumbing to the house's power. The oppressive weight of despair wrapped around me like a heavy shroud, tightening until I could barely breathe. Choose, the whisper echoed through the abyss, winding its way into my consciousness. Join us or perish. Yet even as I trembled, my thoughts raced. What choice did I truly have? The heartbeat throbbed in tune with the anguish that clawed at my insides, a primordial force that felt both repulsive and intoxicating. The woman's warning echoed in my mind, rippling uncertainty through my body. It's a cycle feeding on the damned. With each heartbeat, a pulsing figure began emerging from the inky darkness, a silhouette that commanded both reverence and dread. It moved with an almost predatory grace, and as the shadows parted, I caught a glimpse of shimmering eyes drenched in malice. So young, so foolish, it rasped, a smile curving its lips into a snarl that didn't belong to any living thing. You could be part of something greater if only you can withstand the darkness. Get away. I shouted, regaining a frail semblance of control, but my words fell flat against the impending doom. The contours of the hallway shuddered and began to warp, as if the reality itself was bending around this harbinger of shadows. The walls pulsed, colors bleeding in horrific splendor, drawing me into a nightmarish limbo where time lost meaning. You long for the warmth of the heart, it cooed, mockery lacing its tone. How delightful it would be to experience such bliss. The promises of eternity await, only if you have the courage to seize it. With futile defiance, I staggered backward, my palms pressing against the wall, slick with moisture and despair. I felt the gritty texture give a little under my touch as the shadows surged forward, coiling around my ankles, tugging at me like vengeful spirits yearning for liberation. Desperation clawed at my throat, stifling anything I might have wanted to say. Find her, it rasped suddenly, all too aware of the power it had over my fragmented psyche. The woman you spoke to, her life hangs by a thread. Without her, you remain but a vessel, a mere echo to history's cries. Horrific images flooded my mind, a cascade of faces trapped in the throes of their own haunting. I saw the little girl first, her laughter now twisted into sinister giggles, and the woman, her haunting plea for assistance morphing into a desperate cry. I shook my head violently, but the visions poured forth unabated, branding themselves as memories etched in anguish. Ill save them. I screamed, but even as I said it, doubt burrowed deep within. The shadows laughed, reverberating through the ghastly architecture of the house. Seek her, if you dare, it whispered, and the entire structure shuddered like a living being. You have only moments before the heart calls its next prey. Stop. I pleaded, clutching my head as pain flared with each anguished throb. Just then, the house shook violently, rattling as if unsettled by newfound ambition. A cacophony of whispers erupted, rising and merging into a raucous symphony of doom, echoing my very worst fears. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I stumbled towards the staircase that spiraled into darkness. The shadows seethed, pulling at my heels with desperation and rage, but I fought back, each step feeling like an act of rebellion against the malevolent wills entwined within the walls. I was a fragile spark opposing a tempest, but I couldn't falter now, not when lives hung in the balance that I reached the landing and looked down the corridor, disjointed memories flickering in and out. Whispers turned into pleading cries, pulling me towards a door half open, breathing as if inviting me in. "Help us!" They begged, layered with sorrow but also danger. With every inch I moved closer, the darkness hungrily surged, warping the air around me, whispering sweet lies of release and power. Voices intertwined, tempting me, offering solace and salvation if I offered my allegiance. The heart thudded louder, a primal drumming in tandem with my own escalating terror. Then I saw her, a flicker of a form in the murky light, hair flowing like shadows cascading in moonlight, her face a mask of anguish and hope. Desperation surged through me, blending with the promise I had been granted. Had she been waiting for me all along? Or was she merely another manifestation of the house's cruel design? My heart raced faster than time itself as I reached for the door, hesitation battling with urgency. "You have to trust me," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper, pressed against the crunch of wood beneath my hand. But just before I could plunge into the room, the darkness erupted, surging forth with unmistakable fury. The last thing I saw before it engulfed me was the woman's eyes widening in fear, her frame collapsing against the threshold. An unearthly screech tore through the air, reverberating across the corridors, the house shuddering violently, as I was pulled away into the suffocating void. And then, everything fell silent. I stood in isolation, the darkness compounding around me, whispering promises of dread and despair. With no way out, I could only tremble as the choice finally fell into my trembling hands. One last heartbeat echoed, and with it, a cold voice enveloped my consciousness. Complete the cycle or suffer an eternity of regrets. That I, in that moment of paralyzing fear, I felt a presence behind me, warm breath dancing against my neck, and I knew whatever choice I made, the consequences would echo in the dark long after I had faded away. The silence spun into a fragile tapestry, but it swiftly unraveled, torn by the flicker of a candle's flame illuminating grim echoes of the past. As the darkness released its hold, I found myself standing in a chamber vibrant with malevolence. It felt as if a heavy fog clung to every corner, painting the walls with whispers of despair. The once comforting flicker of light now resembled a distant star in an encroaching void. A chill raced down my spine as my senses heightened, alert for the unseen dangers lurking in this dismal realm. The walls seemed to pulse, holding secrets that echoed with every beat of my fluttering heart. Fragments of laughter, distorted by sorrow, rippled through the air as if the very essence of the house had imbued itself into each crevice. I shivered, glancing around in a futile search for any sign of the woman, but shadows danced in mocking response, concealing her presence. The air thickened, pregnant with dread, as bizarre artifacts adorned the room. They were remnants of lives now consumed, grotesque implements that spoke of torment, the cracked doll with glassy, broken eyes, the paintings that warped between ecstasy and agony. Each object resonated with the remnants of past horrors, and I felt their penetrating gaze woven into my very being. "Join us," a voice, soft yet dripping with malice, entwined with the air around me, creeping like ivy up my spine. I turned sharply, fists clenched, desperately seeking the origin of the temptation that sought to ensnare my will. The sensation was intoxicating, a siren's call, as if the walls themselves conjured tales woven in darkness, beckoning me to surrender, but I had seen the cost of surrender: the lives devoured. Rage boiled beneath my skin as I resisted the pull of the shadows thickening around me. Yet, the air grew heavy, the heartbeat pounding in synchronicity with the consuming dread. Without hesitation, I stumbled through the room, toward a doorway draped in tattered curtains, the fabric fluttering with unearthly life, as if begging to be breached. Every fiber urged me forward. Just as I prepared to plunge through the veil, a hand shot from the darkness, catching my shoulder in a vice-like grip. I spun around, heart racing, to find the woman I sought. Her ghostly skin glimmered in the candlelight, eyes wide with terror and unspoken warnings. "Do not follow them," she gasped, her voice a thin thread of urgency, frayed by desperation. "The house wants you. It craves your essence. It will suffocate you in its darkness." Tendrils of shadows closed in around her figure as if every word weighed heavily against the tide of evil pressing down. I felt my breath seize, panic soaring to new heights at the sight of her struggle. "We have to get out," I shouted, but before I could reach out to her, the shadows responded, erupting with an inhuman howl that reverberated through the room. The house groaned, the walls shaking violently as gaping maws of blackness tore open within the floors, swallowing relics of anguish whole, growing ever closer to us. I could feel the pull of despair surging through the room, clawing at my sanity with a fervor that threatened to drag me down. Listen. The woman urged, fear amplified within her gaze. You have a choice, but it will cost you everything you love. Her words came out in gasps as the shadows advanced, swirling around her legs and centering their rage on her laughter, the laughter that had twisted into something dark and hollow. Choose wisely, for there is no going back. With a sudden surge of determination, I surged towards her, every part of me rejecting the oppressive weight that the house laid upon my shoulders. If I was to save us both, I needed to overcome this nightmare, this profound sense of inevitability that threatened to consume our hopes. And then, just as I reached her, she shuddered violently, her eyes darting to the shadows that crept relentlessly, tendrils wrapping tighter around her. You must, she began, but her expression twisted, as if she glimpsed something terrifying in the void. The shadows lunged, sweeping her away with an insatiable hunger, her scream silenced, swallowed by the suffocating darkness. No! I bellowed, reaching out, fingers brushing the fabric of her dress, but nothing remained of her, only the echoes of despair now resonating around me. In that instant, an overwhelming wave of dread crashed over me. I was alone, engulfed in a vacuum where hope dared not venture. And then, through the dissonance, a distant laugh echoed, a familiar, haunting sound that ignited recognition, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Beneath the swell of my fear, my heart thudded with the realization that the voices I'd heard throughout the house had been returning to me all along. They were beckoning me to join them, to become part of their ungodly family. I trembled, my breaths turning shallow as I faced the shadows deepening around me, taunting me, weaving a caterwaul of invitations laced with memories I had yet to understand. Join us, they murmured, their voices dripping with malevolence, a sickly sweet call that promised love and freedom in exchange for my very soul. As despair threatened to consume me, my resolve weakened. I felt an icy touch caress my cheek, a promise and a warning ensnared within its grasp. I had become a vessel for the darkness, ensnared in a web woven of forgotten sorrows, and the suffocating truth dawned on me. Complete the cycle, it whispered, and an electric jolt surged through the room, igniting my senses. But just as I teetered on the edge of surrender, the floor beneath me cracked, splitting wide open, and I fell into a swirling abyss of shadows and despair, not knowing what awaited on the other side. And as darkness enveloped me, I could only scream, my voice lost to the raging tempest, knowing that I had plunged too deep into the murky waters of this nightmare. I plummeted through the howling void, the anxiety surging through me like a relentless tide. As I descended, the very fabric of reality warped around me. Shadows twisted into grotesque formations, faces merging with the darkness that threatened to swallow me whole. I squeezed my eyes shut, desperate to silence the cacophony beckoning me into their depths. A bone-chilling wind carried the voices, wrapping around me, whispering twisted sonnets of the damned. They floated through my psyche, reeling with bittersweet nostalgia and a morbid invitation to surrender. You belong with us, they echoed, the tones sweet and sickly like poison-coated honey. The ground rushed up to meet me, hard and unyielding, and I landed on a floor that felt almost alive beneath me. The impact knocked the air from my lungs, and I gasped, springing upright in an outlandish corridor lit by wavering candlelight. Each flicker seemed controlled by a will of its own, casting sinister shadows that danced and vibrated upon the walls as if in a constant state of ecstasy or torment. I forced myself to look around, my heart pounding against my ribcage like a desperate prisoner seeking escape. The corridor stretched infinitely in either direction, tainted portraits lining the walls. The figures seemed to shift and writhe, their eyes igniting with dark energy as I passed. I recognized fleeting glimpses, faces belonging to those I had lost, friends and family whose fates weighed heavy on my heart. But the emotions etched in their expressions were wrong. They reflected sadness laced with malevolence, their lips curling into twisted smiles that I hesitated, my breath hitching. Is this all a dream? A cruel trick? I implored the shadows, hoping for a response. But an oppressive silence suffocated any reply, and I continued, compelled by an invisible force pulling me forward. Each step echoed, a melody of dread carried by the house's sinister heartbeat. As I ventured deeper, the walls began to pulse, vibrating as they revealed a series of rooms branched off the corridor. A chill of foreboding crawled down my spine, urging me to turn around, but the house had renewed its grip on my fate. In desperation, I swept into the first room, inhaling the fetid air. The sight that met me chilled my blood. A collection of withered dolls sat in a grotesque circle, their glassy eyes shimmering with an unnatural light. Each held a decayed remnant of something once alive. A shiver coursed through me as I stepped closer. One doll bore a striking resemblance to the one I had lost to the darkness. Its dress might have been cotton once, but now it was tattered and stained by the remnants of something unholy. An echo of her desperate plea ricocheted in my mind. The house wants you. It craves your essence. I staggered back at the thought, but the dolls continued to gaze. Join us, they chorused in unsettling harmony, and I felt my heart falter at their twisted invitation. My fingers brushed against one, and suddenly, a torrent of memories surged through me. Moments of joy quickly consumed by betrayal, laughter replaced through tears, vivid flashes of unspoken destinies entwined with the darkness surrounding me. I stumbled out of the room, panic threatening to overwhelm me, and confronted another door. Each exploration brought forth echoes of anguish, calling from beyond. I pressed on, desperate to escape the gruesome truths slowly surfacing. The next room revealed what I could only describe as an altar. Gruesome symbols adorned the walls, wrought from what appeared to be dried blood, and at its center stood a worn-out table, hosting an array of glistening jagged blades, each one screaming for sacrifice. Above hung a bilious tapestry depicting scenes of horror-twisted figures dancing upon graves marked with long-forgotten names. A whisper filled the air, alluring yet terrifying, "This is where you shall provide." Just as I started to retreat, the air grew heavier. The door slammed shut behind me, and from a darkened corner, a figure emerged. I clenched my fists in defiance, heart pounding. It had the unmistakable silhouette of the woman, a mirage shimmering in the candlelight. "You've come back to me," she murmured, her voice dripping with both warmth and an unearthly chill, but as she drew closer, the false light illuminated her features, her once familiar visage twisted into a mask of agony, adorned with the remnants of shadows. "You must choose. What will you give to save them?" she asked, her voice echoing off the damp walls, piercing through my frail strength and shredding my resolve. "Get away from me!" I shouted, though my voice wobbled, revealing the cracks that were forming in my courage. The walls seemed to pulse now, vibrating with malignant glee. "Save them, or save yourself," she pleaded, her eyes pleading yet lost to the abyss. "You must know there can be no salvation without sacrifice." The room flickered with shadows, and the walls trembled as if in anticipation. Then, with a sickening gasp, she raised her hand, and jagged shadows erupted from beneath the altar, a writhing mass. "The house hungers, and it demands your choice." Just as dread began to envelop me, a torrent of memories surged in a sweep of faces, both familiar and strange, calling my name as they succumbed one by one. A choice dangled before me like fruit on a branch, both enticing and horrifically repulsive. But before I could reply, the ground beneath me roared, fissures opening as more shadows converged, claws reaching out, and I felt the weight of 1,000 anguished souls attempting to drag me into the depths of despair. My heart receded, decision teetered on the precipice of madness as I gasped with the realization that resisting would lead only to their doom and my own. "Choose." The echoes of the house cried out with a sinister harmony echoing through my very core. And in that moment, just before the shadows consumed me, I saw a last fading image, a child's laugh drifting through the air, haunting and tender, reminding me of what could be lost. And as the darkness beckoned further, enveloping me in an embrace thick with malevolence, I could only wonder, would my next choice lead to salvation, or would it seal my fate? The shadows danced wildly as I staggered back, desperately trying to dodge the grasping claws of darkness that sought to ensnare me. My skin crawled with trepidation as I felt the chill of despair curling around my ankles like a serpent. I fought against the overwhelming urge to succumb to the house's terrifying call, but the figure remained, her hollow eyes boring into my very essence. "Look into the abyss, and it will look back at you," she intoned, her voice a haunting melody that echoed within the forsaken walls. I could feel the shadows swirling frantically, keen to envelop me whole while the altar pulsated with a grisly life of its own. The air grew thick with an electric malice, as if the house sensed my wavering resolve. "What do you want from me?" I gasped, my voice battling the overwhelming silence, a desperate cry amidst chaos. "You know what you must do," she replied, a smile twitching across her lips, a sick parody of warmth. She took a step closer, her figure flickering like an old film reel, and just then, I glimpsed something terrible behind her, a swirling void that threatened to eclipse everything I was. That I turned sharply, hoping against hope that I might find an exit. But the walls were shifting, and the corridor itself twisted into an unrecognizable maze. "I can't," I murmured, my voice almost lost in the sinister harmony of whispers that filled the room. My past clung to me like a miasma, suffocating and relentless. Each memory that surfaced seemed to claw at my sanity, echoing the laughter of that lost child, now a ghost flitting just beyond my reach. Then, a low growl reverberated from the shadows, snapping my attention back to the figure before me. The momentary flash of lucidity shattered as her face contorted into a twisted mockery, morphing into something grotesque, shrouded in shadows. "You have no choice, dear one. The house has a hunger, and so do the lost souls. Your torment is not their only price." Suddenly the shadows roared louder, erupting as if they had gained a life of their own, climbing toward the altar in a frenzied frenzy. I was about to bolt when the air shifted, thickening with palpable dread, then slashed again by a spine-chilling cry echoing from beyond the walls. Was it a pleading wail? No, it was laughter, manic and joyful. It tore through the air like a blade, ricocheting around me. My heart thudded painfully as I turned toward the sound. "No!" I cried out. "You can't take them." But a second laugh, childish and sweet, rang out, coaxing me out of my corner. "Save me! Save me!" The laughter echoed, each cry piercing through the veil of shadows that surrounded me. The darkness fluttered violently as if it were a living being, sensing my pulsing fear. I felt the air growing heavier, the temperature plummeting as frost began to creep up the walls, etching away at the light in the room. A haunting glow began to emanate from the altar, illuminating horror written in writhing shapes. Then, as if orchestrated by some unseen conductor, the restless shadows converged into a mass at my feet, contorting and coalescing into a many-legged monstrosity of teeth and claws. It lunged forward with primal hunger, but I couldn't retreat. My surroundings clamped down upon me like a vice. "Choose. Sacrifice. Save." The voices shrieked in unison, the echoes twisting into a cacophony that threatened to drown me in despair. I felt my heart split, torn between the laughter of the child so full of light, innocence lost, and the knowing, cold embrace of doom enveloping me, and in a moment of clarity, I reached within, breathless. I had to choose. I had to know. I lunged toward the swirling chaos, my desperate yell piercing through the frenzy. "I choose." But before I could utter the final syllable, the ground opened beneath me. The altar throbbed and pulsed as the evil sucked me down into an abyss saturated with the weight of countless anguished moans. I plummeted into a new darkness, a waterfall of despair swirling violently around me. As I fell deeper, I saw fleeting visions, moments of life, laughter, and love dancing just beyond my grasp. A flicker of light, a doorway beckoned me from the edge of my sight. But before I could make it to the exit, the darkness solidified into a wall, blocking my desperate escape. The darkness coiled around me like a noose tightening, squeezing sanguine fear from my body, until I heard it, a whisper that chilled my blood. "You'll never escape your choices." And just as the shadows swallowed the last of my thoughts, the laughter erupted again, now echoing like a death knell in the void, resonating through the space until it fell silent. But in the absence of sound, a new horror unfurled before me, the spun threads of fate unveiled, a pair of eyes, unblinking and hollow, observing from the somber depths of darkness. They bore witness, and suddenly, I wasn't alone anymore. "Welcome to your truth," a voice oozed from the void, drawing closer, and my heart dropped at the realization of what emerged, a figure dressed in shadows, its form malleable, yet mocking, familiar and terrifying. "You've always belonged to us." With terror-laced urgency, I thought of the child, of all I stood to lose, as the walls echoed with their laughter, now melding into a sinister hymn. Choose, the chorus surged, and I found myself at the precipice of another ghastly decision, my unyielding love or my already tainted soul. And in that dread-laden moment, the ground beneath grated ominously as if anticipating my answer, willing my soul into an irrevocable fate. A grotesque silence hung heavy, only to be shattered by the burgeoning laughter, a grating harbinger of horrors still lurking in the blackened corners of the house. And as the shadows closed around me, deciding the outcome of my worth, I could only scream into the void as time twisted and splintered, knowing that whatever was left of me was teetering on the brink of oblivion and that the true horror was yet to come. The last thing I remember was the chill of the darkness wrapping around me, a suffocating embrace that felt both familiar and foreign. It rippled through my being, like veins coursing with icy despair, pulling me deeper into the very core of the house's sinister heart. I gasped for breath, hoping to wake from this agonizing nightmare, but the shadows held me fast. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself on the floor of a stark, sterile room bathed in blinding white light. I blinked rapidly, disoriented, the transition jarring. This didn't feel like the house. I pushed myself to my knees and took in my surroundings, cold, clinical walls lined with monitors displaying haunting algorithms of light, forms that flowed like liquid nightmares across the screens. I pressed my palms to the floor, bewildered, struggling to comprehend the dissonance of my reality. "Welcome back," a voice echoed across the room, smooth yet laced with malice. I turned, my heart hammering against my chest, to see a figure cloaked in shadow, a haunting silhouette against the stark brightness. It stepped closer, revealing a face that flickered like a ghost caught between realms, shifting between anguish and mania. "You've returned from your journey, what have you done to me?" I gasped, panic clawing at my throat. "Where am I? It's quite simple, really. You are home," it purred, a grin widening across its face until it resembled a malevolent mask. "This is the border between our world and yours, a reflection of the choices you've made. The house holds no power here, it exists as a mere extension of your own fears." I struggled against rising dread, my pulse racing as flashes of the house's horrors echoed in my mind. "I don't belong here. I don't want to be a part of this," I shouted, trembling with terror. "Oh, dear one, but you already are." The figure swept its arm dramatically, gestures inviting but concealing malice. "The shadows that consumed you, the cycles of despair you've witnessed, they are a part of you now. You played your role, diverging paths until you found yourself enveloped by the darkness. You were never meant to escape. No. I retorted, loss surging through me. Not the child, not the woman. What had I sacrificed? I couldn't save them. "Please, help me," the figure merely chuckled, the sound echoing like broken glass in the sterile silence. "They were ours to take long before you arrived. You think you alone are burdened by choice? Each soul in those shadows has faced their own haunting truths. Let me go. I refuse to accept this," I cried, desperation infusing my voice. But with each fervent plea, I could feel my mind wavering, an internal battle raging within the abyss. Without warning, a cacophony erupted from the monitors, images flooding the screens, each one playing out before me in torturous clarity, the little girl laughing as shadows danced around her, the woman screaming silently for help, the faces twisted in eternal anguish, lost souls feeding the darkness while I stood powerless to aid them. "You see," it whispered, the voice oozing with pleasure. "This is where true horror lies, where every choice reverberates through the fabric of existence. Where you abandoned them, you also chose to become entwined with the very abyss that would consume you whole. No, I whispered, the images consuming me, stripping my resolve bare. "Yes," it echoed back, its voice now louder, filled with haunting joy. "You are one of us now, a keeper of lost souls, a vessel for despair that shall endure for eternity. You can never change the past." I backed away, trembling as the realization sparked within me like a sickening flame. The house, this entrapment had been a test all along. I was not merely a victim of its darkness, but a conduit through which it perpetuated suffering, my very essence tethered to the shadows. The pact was now binding. And then, I felt a sudden clarity course through the pain, memories once filled with love now twisted into grotesque echoes of fate. The laughter, the screams, they were not just haunting remnants, they were the shadows birthed in the house, promising vengeance for the despair that surrounded it. "Join us," the figure hissed, its face warping into the abyss itself, merging with the pulsating light leaking from the monitors. "Become part of the legacy. Let the light of despair reign once more." No. I shouted, trying to break the hold, but the laughter rose around me, echoing against the walls, wrapping me in their chilling embrace until my mind shattered further. My eyes half closed, I felt their cold tendrils drawing me back into the depths, but as I teetered on the brink of surrender, a flicker of determination sparked anew. Was this truly how my story would end? Was my fate sealed in this false light? With all my will, I spun away from the figure, from the infinite reflections of despair, and ran toward the door at the end of the room, where the light dimmed and shadows whispered. I could feel the weight of the darkness clawing at my back, eager to pull me into its depths. And just as I reached the door, I flung it open, bursting outside, fear giving way to a cacophony of anguish, yet unyielding, the world trembling at the precipice. I was enveloped in darkness, blinding and thick, haunting whispers curling around me, each step pulling endlessly as shadows leapt within. In that moment a singular heartbeat echoed in my ears. My own. A burst of clarity reigned, and the weight of my choices bore down on me like a storm. I had not lost myself. They were waiting for Meth Woman with her pleading gaze, the child with the laughter twisted into echoes of torment. I would bring them back from this darkness or perish trying, and perhaps, just perhaps, this was the key to unravel the cycle. But as I stepped into the void, I heard the figure's final words echo behind me, a haunting coda: "Each rebirth feeds the darkness. You cannot escape what you become," and it resonated through the shadow, shilling, taunting. The truth that twisted through me was manifest. Not everything is solved, evil still lingers. The shadows closed in as I pressed forward, breathless and wildly desperate, knowing the horror didn't end here, perhaps it had only just begun. The weight of choice and consequence hung in the air, entwining with whispers of doom, and as I faced the unknown, I felt the laughter rise, and inside me, I realized the house still called, and its hunger could never truly be satiated. In that final heartbeat, I surged forward into the darkness, embracing the insidious grip of forgotten fates, and I finally understood: true horror resides not in what is lost, but in what is still to come.